Thank you so much, everyone, for joining with me in honoring my father-in-law. He was a great man, and he was probably the most intimidating person to have as your father-in-law. But he loved deeply and cared for us. And today I wanted to take an opportunity to share my experience with him and just the way that he touched my life, my family's life, you know, the kind of character I saw day in and day out, every morning, and through all the challenges. You know, last week I was with him. We've been with him for the last couple of years, every day by his side, you know, going with his wife, and we've always been there with him. But you know, this last week was actually a beautiful time, and I think, you know, this last song we sang, you make beautiful things out of the dust, out of the difficult moments. God is creating beautiful things inside of our hearts. And, you know, this last week, we were in his room, you know, able to sleep there with him in his last few days and with him all the time. And I remember reading to him from the Chansung Young. I wanted to encourage him, and I opened the book just opened it up and looked for something to read, and I just started reading. And it was talking about how the child, the baby, is in the womb. And the baby is so scared and screaming and thinking, what is my mother doing to me? This is terrible. And the baby's in pain and agonized in this moment. And Father said, well, what do you think God is thinking right then? Do you think God feels bad for this baby as he's screaming and crying and saying, don't let me out of here, don't take me away? No, God has a small smile when he looks at that child. And it went on to talk about the Songha and about how we in our last days, our body starts to scream out, don't take me, don't take me. And there's this fear, and sometimes we're scared of it. And it said, do you think God is also fearful with you? No, God has a small smile because he knows where you're going. And I felt really that was the way that it was for us together with Reiner, that we could feel God's small smile on us and God just shining his love into our life. And it was such a precious time at the end. And like I said, me and my wife, we were able to be there by his side. We slept there in his room, and they woke us when it was getting close. And it was such a beautiful experience to be there with him. And for the first time in weeks, his pain was gone, and he looked so relaxed. And we sat by his side as he was breathing, and we sang with him, and we prayed with him, and we encouraged him. And within a few minutes, he took his last breath, but it was so peaceful, and he was relaxed, and it looked like the weight of the world had come off his shoulders. And for the first time, the tension was gone, and it was so beautiful to be there and assure him that everything was going to be all right, and everything was fine. And it was just a beautiful experience. And even this morning reminded me of it. It started snowing this morning. Last Sunday, it started snowing early in the morning. And many people didn't know it because it happened kind of early. As we were leaving the hospice finally with Reiner, I was waiting with them. And as they were taking him out to the funeral home, it was so beautiful because first the nurse in the hospice, they ring a bell. And all the staff came up and lined the hallway. And as we walked out, they all acknowledged us and welcomed us and encouraged us as he took his next step in his journey. You know, and everyone there really believes this is a beautiful, like a birthing room. Many of the hospice nurses I talked to said, we don't feel we're dealing with death, we're dealing with new life. So many people talked with us about how we really have seen so many people go this way, and we feel more like we're midwives than nurses, you know. And what a beautiful way to think about it. And so they received him, they sent him off in such a beautiful way. But it was amazing because the day before was beautiful, sunny, warm, right? And there was no snow for a few days. And just right before he left the building, a beautiful snowfall came down. to coat the earth with just a pure blanket of snow. And within 10 minutes of him leaving, it disappeared. All the snow was gone, and it didn't snow anymore that day. It's a beautiful day, but I felt like God was laying this blanket down, this pure blanket for a pure soul. That was Reiner Vincenz. So today, that's what we come to honor, is the life, the legacy of Reiner Vincenz. And I'm so proud to call him my father-in-law, to call him my papa, to go this journey with him. And today I just wanted to recognize that, and recognize the great man that he was. Yesterday we heard a lot about his mission, his church work. But one thing that always stood out for Reiner was he was always together with his wife. Always together. So Reiner wasn't just a great leader, but he loved Barbara so completely and fully. But to be honest, who couldn't, right? Barbara's a wonderful person. So he got it easy there. He also raised a beautiful daughter, if I do say so myself. And he guided this knucklehead son-in-law that he received into becoming so much more than I ever imagined I would be. You know, I came here thinking I was going to be a history teacher, that I was going to go on, me and my wife were going to be teachers and live a nice little life. And Reiner always encouraged me. He always saw something bigger and deeper inside of me. And I think many of us had that experience with him, right? That he saw something more inside of each one of us. He believed in the people that he met, right? And he had that way of looking into your soul, right? That piercing gaze that could see who you were and also lift you up. That gaze was beautiful at times, but I'll tell you, when I first married Lena and we would sit at the dinner table, and each bite I took, I would look up, and there he was, staring into my soul. It intimidated me, but he was just looking for that beautiful spark inside of each one of us. And he believed in each one of us. No matter where we were, no matter what we were doing in our life, he saw something more in us. And that was beautiful. I was so moved when I heard many people said, Reiner wasn't a great leader, but he was really a great member first. You know, he was that leader that was part of the team. Never separate, always a brother, always close to each person, always understanding, always uplifting, always encouraging. And that's the Reiner that I got to see every morning, every night. And we were just so moved, you know, this last week to see people all over the world. Because Reiner's love wasn't reserved just for us. It was reserved for he gave it freely to every person he met. And it didn't matter what you ended up believing, if you disagreed with him or not, he loved you and he cared for you. And he really blessed many people's lives. And yesterday was really a testimony to that, and we appreciate that. And I know Barbara appreciates so much all the love that's coming from around the world. You know, and I just, for a moment, can we recognize Barbara? Because she was a Thank you so much. You know, Reiner and Barbara were nothing if they were separate, and they've always been together. He always represented heaven in their missions. He always said, we've got to go forward, we've got to pack up the buses, and we got to go today. And Barbara would say, wait, Reiner, we haven't done the laundry. She always brought him down to earth and was able to make sure that everyone was taken care of well, he was able to carry on the mission. But it was together, really, that both of them were strong, that both of them could be the leaders they were. I remember when my wife and I were asked to be pastors ourselves, and it was so beautiful. Actually, they said, this is a great time because now we're going to ask people to pastor as couples. And you'll be the first pastors to be co-pastors as a couple, as husband and wife. And I came home and I talked to Barbara and Reiner, and I realized we weren't the first. These two pioneered the way of a couple ministry. Right? Because it doesn't really matter what we say, but when you live the example, you move people's hearts, and they always did that. And so we appreciate that about them. And so we know all of Reiner's accomplishments are also Barbara's accomplishments. Amen. And together they brought victory for God and true parents. So we thank you. So I wanted to share some things. You know, yesterday, Franco actually touched on one of my stories I was going to share today, but he doesn't know the whole story yet, so there's more. It's to be continued. Yesterday, he shared, Reiner was always very proud about when his birthday was. And he would tell me this was a very providential thing. I don't know if you know, but Reiner was very fixed on numbers. Dates and all the numbers were very important for him. So he would always say, God's Day is January 1st, right? And Jesus' birthday is the 3rd. And Father's is the 6th, and that mine is the 9th. But there's more to the story, because then he had a daughter that was born on the 12th, 3 days later. And as we looked on, we saw on the 15th was the day that he took the IOWC team, the first IOWC team, over to Japan and began that new providential mission of bringing the world together. So the 15th was a very significant day for him. And finally, on the 18th of January was the day he ascended. It's as if Reiner had picked the day and went with it, right? And being a German, he would never be late. So it couldn't be the 19th. It had to be the 18th. But we're so proud of him. He was an amazing person, a pioneer through and through. And all his life, that's all he wanted to do. He wanted to move forward and make new ground for God and true parents. And that's all he wanted from us even, from his kids. And I asked him a few times, I said, so what do you want your grandchildren to know? What do you want your grandchildren? He said, only one thing, that they will be a pioneer. So, good luck, Morel. And we've got our new one on the way too, so good luck to him too. And anyways, we've been very excited, but his life was so amazing, and it always was a blessing to us. And over the last few weeks, I've been more intimidated than ever, because everyone says, well, it's great because Reiner's legacy lives through you and Lena. And if you heard the stories from the last few weeks, you would be scared to be told that he wants to live on through you. I've been nervous, but he's been such a wonderful person. And one of the things that I saw with Reiner was he always loved true parents, and he really believed in what they said. Everything. It was like Bo Hipak said in the letter yesterday, said, Father will look for the hardest mission and say, that one is for Reiner, because he will do it. That was always Reiner's way. Even when Father would maybe make an offhand recommendation, he would take it so seriously and do everything he could to fulfill it. He was always faithful, and I believe he never said a word or spoke a word. He never told someone to do something that he didn't deeply believe in and live out in every word and action of his own life. He was absolutely sincere. He was absolutely aligned with true parents all the time. And although he was thick-headed and stubborn sometimes, I always knew his heart was always there for God and true parents. And today, I want to open our minds to the idea that I believe some people are fulfilling fully what true parents were hoping. You know, true parents' mission is to make many, many true parents, right? To make people that really live out God's love in their everyday action, that really love their spouse, that really love their children, but also really love the world and fulfill it in their everyday life. And those were the people, you know, through the blessing, Father was hoping to raise up people to be like him, to become true parents. And I had the opportunity to live with someone that I believe really fulfilled that mission. And I believe that we can walk in those footsteps and believe that each one of us can really fulfill that mission, because Reiner and Barbara, I have to say, are like many true parents, have done it, you know, have followed true parents, have lived out their love, and they're going to continue to do that. And I think they're the model of how all of us members can really become like true parents and become a testimony to the world. And so it's not so much in their words, but in their daily life, that they testify to the reality that each one of us should raise up to be God's sons and daughters, true sons and daughters. And I think they did it. So I'm just impressed by them always. But I wanted to share quickly, just shortly, a few experiences, a little bit about their life, and some experiences. You know, Reiner grew up in, he was born in 1939, just at the beginning of World War II. And so it was a very difficult time to grow up, obviously, right? And the country's being devastated, and they don't know what's going to happen. And at the end of the war, while many people were starting to recover, he was on the wrong side of the fence, wrong side of the wall, and he had to grow up in East Germany. For Reiner, childhood was a difficult time. It was a difficult time. He was an only child. His dad had a business, so he was always afraid the communists were going to take his business if they said the wrong thing, if they thought the wrong thing. So family conversation was very limited. If they had something important to talk about, they went out to the woods and hid out because they were afraid they were being microphoned. You know, there was always this intensity about his childhood. But as Lena shared, there was one thing that kept him going, was his teddy bear. And it was so beautiful that, you know, sometimes we take for granted the life we have, but he had nothing but made the most of it. And he took that time to train to be God's true son. And I think even his training, he was a youth soldier. So all the children became youth soldiers. And he would train during the day to become a future soldier for the East German army. And at night, he would sneak out to the church, and he would lead youth group. So I feel like God really used that time to mold him, to make him into a soldier on one hand, that he could always march on, but at the same time to help him develop this true belief in God. And it was funny because when he first had the idea of a soul, he had never heard these things. He had never gone to church before. But when he was young, he started getting this vision. And this voice would come to him and say, you have to protect your soul. And he went to his mom and he said, Mom, what's a soul? And she got really nervous. And she took him outside and said, we can't talk about that. We can't talk about that. And eventually, the voice came back to him and he knew that this was something wonderful and something very precious, his soul. So he went and he found a church and he connected with that church. And his whole childhood, he then connected through that and protected his soul. When he was 17, he had the opportunity to go over to West Germany. And his dad took him out into the woods. And his dad knew that if Reiner didn't come back from West Germany, that his whole family could go to prison. You know, his whole family could be punished. So his dad took him out to the woods and said, Reiner, you can't come back. He said, if one of us can be free, it should be you. You know, a father's love is like that. Even at the cost of their own life, he was sent out. And I think Reiner held that in his life, his whole life, you know, because that's the way he treated each one of us. He loved us even at the expense of his own life. And he wanted the best for this world. And if one person can be free, if this world can be free, and he has to suffer, he was willing to do that without a second thought. That was always him. So he came over to West Germany, and I'm not going to go through his whole life, but he started working with a guy named Peter. And he started working with this guy, and for some reason they really connected, and Peter really liked him. And he knew Peter had just come back from America, and Peter had a big secret. And Reiner kept trying to guess, what is his secret? He must have a new machine. You know, he must have some new technology to make $1 million. Because Reiner was really set on going to Brazil and living out his whole life as like a very wealthy guy with boats and planes and living out in Brazil. So he was excited about Peter's secret. And so he met Peter and he talked with Peter, and Peter took him over to his house one night. And Peter showed him the divine principle. And he was surprised because Reiner took to it so sincerely. He asked so many questions. He was so excited about it. And Reiner quickly joined the church. And Reiner was so excited about this mission. And he was just a young guy and just trying to figure out his life. But he was excited for this mission. And in those days, they all, they worked at their job, and they came home and they did center work and church work, and they went back to work the next day. But every night they would study together, and they would pray together, and they would grow together. And eventually, I think Peter was eyeing a good man for his sister here, but he picked him out, and anyways, he did good, and he wanted to help out more. And when the call came to go to France, he was so determined to go. But Peter looked at him and saw this kid, and said, "What is this guy going to do over there?" He said, "The French are going to chew him up and spit him out." And it was such a scary idea to go out into the country, into the enemy country. But Reiner was connected because he was a Huguenot. He always told us about that. We were the Protestant faith. We were, and I need to go back and restore France because my ancestors left. I have to go back. So he came back, and he finally got the permission. And I know some of you heard yesterday that he fought with Peter. I'm sure Barbara was saying, this Reiner guy, he's crazy to go to France. They all didn't want him to go. And finally he got permission from Father. And that was always Reiner's feeling. He would adamantly stand up for what he believed in. He knew he was called to go to France. And even though everyone told him no, not in a disrespectful way, but he kept coming back and said, "I really feel I have to do this." And finally he went to the source itself. He said, "Let me go to Father." And he said when Father sent that letter, he jumped to the ceiling. And that's how he explained it. He was so excited to go to France. He knew no French. He had just started studying the principle, and there was no way he was going to be successful, but he was determined. So he went out, and Peter had one last thing to throw at him. He said, "Okay, Father said you can be a missionary, but I need to know you know the principle." So he designed a test. He said, "You just take this simple test. You can go to France." So he designed a test that he decided Reiner would never be able to accomplish. He was a sneaky guy. He designed this test and made it so difficult. But Reiner was determined, and he spent 3 days, actually during Christmas. He slept in Schmitten, in a little hotel in Schmitten, Germany, where we had a church center for a long time. And he prayed and he studied there for 3 days. And the owner kept coming up concerned for him. He said, "Don't you want to go to your family? It's Christmas." And he said, no, I have something so important I have to do. And he passed the test, of course, and he went to France. And France, he poured everything into. And it's amazing because it took him 3.5 years. And then one night, he was going back on the train. He met many people. He's taught many people. He worked with many people. But he wasn't able to find anyone. And then one night, he's going on the trains, and he notices these lights in a different way. And it wasn't, his course was lit up in a different way than normal. So he followed the lights. And he took different trains home than he ever took. And that's when he met Henri. And he talked to Henri, and Henri was excited, and Reiner was excited about this. But he was also a little bit cautious, and he knew that he was excited many times and let down many times. So he made an appointment with Henri, and then when Henri came, Reiner knew right away this was the person. Because Reiner's experience with the French was they were never on time. Everyone was late. I don't know if anyone has experience with some French people. But the Germans are a little different. Especially Reiner. And so Reiner set up this meeting, and Henri, in the first time in 3.5 years, someone came on time to the meeting. And that was Henri. And so Henri quickly became great friends, a great partner with Reiner. Together, Henri and Reiner did amazing things in those first couple of years. And Barbara soon joined him as they received a blessing. And they joined together. And the next 3.5 years, they planted 7 churches. And not just in France, also in Northern Africa. They went everywhere. These guys were crazy. And Reiner would go and visit and spend time and just raise up. And he always said, what you have to do is you have to find 3 people. You don't have to find a whole nation. You don't have to do it. You find 3 people, and he would invest everything in those people. And so his way was sometimes looked at as a slow way. He didn't go for quick results, but he invested absolutely into people. And they became his closest allies, his closest friends. And through this, I think Henri and him built this foundation that could carry France forward. And I'm so grateful for France because every year still they send the most beautiful cards in the world. I don't know how they're beautiful, they're gorgeous. I should make an art display. But they've always taken such good care of Reiner, and we appreciate the French. Thank you, everyone there. And I try to make a long story short because his life is like that, right? I'm going to jump over. Yoito was his next proudest thing. He loves France, and he loved being part of the Yoito rally. And Reiner had gone over to Japan first, right? And he did this great campaign in Japan. And he loved Japan. And Reiner was always, like I said, he always wanted to follow up. He always wanted to reinvest in people. And so he goes through Japan. And at the end of the Japanese tour, Father called him to Korea. And so Reiner made his arrangements in Japan. He said, I'm going to be right back. I'm going to help Father quickly with this Korean project. And I'm going to come back and we're going to keep working. And that was his idea. And he was very serious about it. So he was going to go over for the 12-city tour. He went over there. And they completed the 12-city tour. And Father took him at the end of the tour. And he took him up a mountain. And they started walking up this mountain. And Father was very serious and had all these ideas. And Reiner had a very clear idea too. He was going to tell Father what he was going to do. I'm going to go back to Japan. And so they're walking up this mountain, and Reiner keeps looking around, and Father keeps trying to talk to him. He goes, Reiner, what's going on? And Reiner's just wandering around, and finally he goes, well, I can't find my camera, Father. And so Father stops everything. And Father goes looking around the mountain and searches through the mountain. And Reiner always said, imagine that. The Messiah is concerned about my camera and looking for it. He was so amazed by him. And so they finally found his camera, and Father said, okay, good, now do I have your attention? And Reiner said, yes, Father, okay. So they started talking. And Father said, okay, good job on this 12-city tour. Now I have something even bigger I want you to do. And Reiner said, wait, before you say that, I'm making arrangements to go back to Japan now. And Father said, no, you're not going to Japan. And Reiner said, no, I am going to Japan. They got in a little argument. I think, a true disciple, someone that really loves their parent, can get into arguments. And he did this. He told us many times that he would have disagreements with Father. and they would lovingly work it out. But he really wanted to go to Japan. But Father said, no, I need you to do the Yoido rally. Because Billy Graham spoke there, and he brought almost 1 million people, so we need to beat Billy Graham. And Reiner is thinking, wow, that's a big thing. And he said, well, how long do we have? A few months, or what do we have? You know, we need over 1 million people. And Father said, 18 days. So here Reiner is. He's been told he can't go back to Japan. And he's got to take on this huge mission. And so he takes it on, and he goes out, and they've got members from Japan in their team, and Korea, and all of Europe, and they're flooding the streets. And 18 days later, Reiner had the helicopter go in the air and count, and they had 1.2 million people together for the Yoido rally. But Reiner was always very proud of this, and just uniting with Father and what they could do. But you know, one of the, small story, quick, when he went to Korea, he decided he wanted to win over the Korean leaders. Because I think yesterday some people said he was there as the only Western person in these meetings. And so no one was there to support him. And so he decided, I'm going to win them over. So he blew up these pictures from France of true parents when they were there. And this picture was a beautiful picture. He loved it because true father and true mother were walking down the streets holding hands. And Father was holding Mother's purse. And he thought, this is such a beautiful picture. These Koreans are going to be so moved that I brought them this picture. And he passed out this picture. And immediately, they start shouting and screaming at Reiner. And he thought, what did I do? What did I do? At that time, Father was a very masculine leader for them. And he should always be in front of his wife, never next to her. She should probably walk pretty far behind him too, you know? And a man would never hold a woman's purse, right? So this infuriated him. But Tiger Park stood up for him. And they were all arguing with Reiner and didn't want Reiner to be mobilizing. And why are we going to listen to this young German kid? You know, I mean, his age was a problem. He wasn't Korean. I mean, he had a lot of things against him. And everyone was fighting him. And then he said, Tiger Park stood up. And he slowly rolled his sleeves up. Hold them up. Does anyone have a problem? And they all shut up. And they worked beautifully and wonderfully in harmony forever after. Now, they had their challenges. But Reiner was always one to his desire was just to fulfill the mission. It was never about his credit. It was never about honoring him. It was never about anything to do with him. It was always about achieving the goal. So when he was slighted, if he was insulted, he would put that aside because he knew he had to accomplish God's will. And so this was the Reiner that many of us knew and loved. But I'm going to jump into my experience very quickly. I'm going to try and close this out. I moved in almost 8 years ago. I met him as a personal... I heard him speak in Germany 10 years ago. And I was very moved by him. He was a very powerful speaker. It was right after the 40-year anniversary in France, and then he came to STF and spoke with us. And he came and he delivered this beautiful message. And I mean, the guy had done everything. He'd been everywhere. He met everyone, spoke like 6 or 7 languages. You know, he was capable of anything. And he always said, to make a long story short, and then he would keep talking for a long time after. So that's what I feel he's channeling me today, because this is longer than I ever speak. To make a long story short. But it was, you know, I met him after our wedding, and we married. I got the chance to marry his daughter, and it was very beautiful. And I saw many beautiful sides of Reiner, but I definitely saw his stubborn side, and I was so intimidated. Anyways, the first thing that came up, the first real roadblock was he had a daughter, right? And he was concerned in the beginning whether he could have a daughter for an offering child because he wanted to carry on his lineage. And he was told by the leaders, oh, don't worry. The husband will just take on his name, on her name. I come from a big family of Gavins, and I'm very proud of him. He was under the understanding that I had agreed to all this before the blessing. I had no recollection of ever having that conversation. So we had a lot of conversations about this, very strong. But I'm so glad. I talked to him. I talked to my wife, and we came up with the idea to join our names together to be Vincenz-Gavin. We did think of Vincenz because it joins both names perfectly, but that would be kind of strange. So we went with Vincenz-Gavin, and I'm very proud to carry that name. It does make me very proud because I saw that he was always sincere. He was always genuine. And even if I didn't always agree with him, or I felt he was a little overcautious sometimes, and he was so adamant about knowing our emergency plans and how we're going to escape to West Illinois if we're bombed here. Or, he had everything planned out all the time. And sometimes it drove me crazy. But he had such concern for his family and such love for his family and always wanted to protect them and keep them safe. And he really loved everybody. He was just an amazing testimony in his life. And the last few years really brought us together. And, to be honest, it's been a challenging last 2 years, especially. 4 years we've been really taking care of Reiner, living with him and taking care of him. But he went to the nursing home, and he still had so much passion. And he had so many things that we needed to do. Every time we saw him, he had his list of things that he expected to be done by the next time we saw him, which would be the next day, because we saw him every day. And it was challenging for all of us. And, he was trying to do things, we were trying to do things. But, through it all, it really was so beautiful because, I felt in that time it formed the 3 generations. In a way that never would have happened elsewhere, any other way. Because we were caring for him. Our lives became interwoven. Me and Lena wouldn't make a decision about what we're going to do if it wasn't connected with Reiner and Barbara, and they would check with us about what, and everything we did in our life, from vacations to church activity to just hanging out, was always connected as a family. Because we had to care for each other. We had to be there for each other. And while it was difficult, I don't regret a moment of it. It was such a beautiful time that shaped our hearts, that transformed us, that tore us to pieces, that built us back up. And we went through every emotion. But it was beautiful to see because Reiner never gave up. He never had an idea in his head that he should take it easy now. And me and my wife really tried to get him to do that. We said, just relax, enjoy your granddaughter. Let's go out for dinner. We'll take care of you. He never wanted that. He only wanted to go out and do more mission. And he was writing people, emailing people, trying to get people involved in his projects. You heard a little bit about the Winnebago yesterday, but you don't know how crazy he was about this Winnebago. He had printed up things. He had all these web browsers about it. He had brochures coming in. Every day he talked about, he just wanted to get out, and he felt so strongly to save America. And he was looking at wheelchair accessible. Even if he couldn't speak, he would go around the country. And he would talk to Barbara all the time, and it would drive her crazy. And he started to notice it was worrying her. He said, oh, don't worry, Barbara. I'll get you a small one. I don't think he understood what she was worried about. But he really wanted to save America. He wanted so badly. He wrote out to me. He had the plan, and I have it still on his computer. He has a plan of how with 3 people he was going to get 3 more people, and they were going to buy these RVs, and he had how many people to each RV and when they would buy a new one, and how pretty soon you'd have 10,000 people. He had it all the way lined up and planned out. And it consumed him day and night. How is he going to save this world? And he was just beautiful. He never complained for his own situation. He only complained that he couldn't give enough. It reminds me, there's a famous patriot that said, "My only regret is I have but one life to give for my country." That was Reiner. Absolutely. But we loved him very deeply, and he guided me all through my life and over these last few years, and always encouraged us to march on and pioneer. And every step of our journey, I know our ministry journey has been unorthodox, and we've gone in ways that we never would have expected. Believe me, I'm just as surprised as many of you. But Reiner always encouraged us. And he said, don't stop. He said, you have to pioneer. This world needs more pioneers. And even if no one understands you, you need to go forward. You need to pioneer. And I think if his message could go out to the world, he wanted us all to know that each one of us has that spark of true parents inside of us. That each one of us are amazing and powerful people beyond what we realize. You know, Reiner saw that in each person he met. And I believe he would want to convey to you today that each one of you has this amazing ability. He was a 20-some-year-old kid when he went to France, not knowing the language, having barely enough money, fasting. He did everything. And he had no reason that he should have been successful. But that's what he believes each one of us are capable of. That we can pioneer together, that we can go out into this world, that we can share God's love. And that's what Reiner would have done until his last day. He was witnessing in that nursing home. He was witnessing to everybody he met. But he was magical with it because he never pushed it on people. He never jumped on people. He always calmly brought them in and intrigued them and would find out what they loved. And he would wait and he would build that relationship. And then he would share with them about our true parents. But every single person, he invested every part of his heart in. And that's what I think he would want all of us to do today. To march on, to continue his legacy of love. To continue his legacy of marching on, of being pioneers, of being victorious. So as you go back to your hometown or work or school, I hope you can carry the lessons from Reiner Vincenz. Whatever he spoke to you, whatever stories you've heard over the weekend, think about those, pray about those. Because I believe his sumwa was not just for him, but was really a blessing for us. Was really a message for each one of us. He hoped to use his sumwa, his autobiography, which we are still working on. Sorry, it's been a rough year, but it will come out. He's got a beautiful autobiography we're working on. But, he wanted all that to bring the children together. And as Eugene was sharing earlier, Reiner's message, that his hope was to bring all the children of the world together. That was Reiner's hope. And he loved beyond any camp, any base, any idea you had. He loved you absolutely. And I hope we can carry that on in our life. That we can love every single person. And even it was a testimony. If you looked at the flowers that were given, there's people from everywhere that gave them. The cards that came in from everybody. People that left the church, people in the church, people that are on another side that you are or whatever. They didn't care because Reiner loved them. And I think we should all do that ourselves. And be like Reiner. And love absolutely. So let Reiner inspire you to face any challenge with determination. If he could do it, if he could face communism and escape East Germany and pioneer a church in France and go around the world and do all these great things, he believes you can do it too. So have trust in God like he did. Believe that God will come through no matter what. And remind yourself that one person really can make a difference. Because if anything is evident from yesterday, one person impacted the world. And I was amazed. I don't know what the final count was, but the video guy said we were upwards of 8,000, approaching 10,000 views online simultaneously, you know? So the world was watching, and the world was moved. And so I just want to thank you for everything that you have done for our family. But more importantly, I want to encourage you. The greatest way to honor Reiner Vincenz and Barbara is to march on yourself. To look the difficulties you face, look them in the face and overcome them. Say, I'm going to march on. Marching on wasn't just a battle cry. It was his way of dealing with the most difficult circumstances. When everything was thrown off course, he would say, well, marching on. So brothers and sisters, I encourage you to march on, to live with that love in your heart, and let's make Reiner's legacy alive here in Chicago and throughout the world. Thank you so much, and God bless you all.